Alrighty, so let's get started on today's topic. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that, Amy? Fantastic. Okay, so let's start at the start. So today's topic is about many of us can feel really broken when we are continuing a certain pattern, and that can also stem from our belief system where we feel like there's something wrong with us. And so this masterclass is all around how our nervous system feeds into that story and the thinking and distorted thinking that we have, and what you can do about it moving forward. This tool is one of the main tools I use in my practice, and something that was really beneficial for people who came to the mental health retreat, to finally feel as though they had hope and that what they were going through was actually common and there was ways to come out of it. So it meant that they had more power over their situation than what they realized. There was more control that they had over it, where they could make decisions in their life to change it. So we're going to move into this space of how our state impacts our thinking. We're going to talk about distorted thinking, ruminating, subconscious beliefs, limiting conscious beliefs, and fantasy. And anytime you have any questions, please just type them in. Even if there's confusion or you would like an example about something, I'm more than happy to go into that space as well. Okay, so this is a sheet that I give my clients when I work with them. It looks like a lot, but once you get a hang of it, it has all the information there that you can always refer back to. But on the left, there's a ladder. We're going to start with that today. So this ladder, what it's identifying is our autonomic nervous system. And why it's on a ladder is because we start off in a regulated state until we become activated and we go into a fear response. And the first fear response that we go into is the sympathetic activation, the fight flight. And the reason why it's on the ladder is because we don't jump this place and go into shutdown. We first go into sympathetic and then we go into a shutdown, which is the dorsal activation. So these are feeding our thought processes, our behaviors, our way of being, our sensations in our body, our emotions. So when we are anxious, our anxiety will feed into how we think about ourselves and about others. And the same going for dorsal activation. When we are feeling a shutdown response, we will also have thinking that's connected to that. What this means is that we can start to observe this part of us, become less identified with it, so then we can change it and start to change our state and our being, so we can move up the ladder into a more social, engaged, connected, curious place. This is when at the top of the ladder, the ventral vagal nerve, when we stimulate this nerve throughout our body, what is happening is we're stimulating a calm, grounded response. So anything that gives us this calm feeling is stimulating the vagus nerve. And that is what's helping us to ground and relax. When we're activated, generally we're activated from, say, a person, maybe someone upset us. It could be an environment. So it could be maybe when I go shopping in a plaza, I feel really overstimulated, so I become activated. It can also be a shutdown response to around the activation too, where I shut down, numb out, and that will be either people, environment, or situations. That maybe public speaking, or I feel like I can't even think straight. I don't even know what to say because I'm so fearful. Often our ability to think logically, to bring in reason or even problem solving has reduced because our prefrontal cortex, part of our brain that does all the problem solving and can function and speak the way that I'm speaking at the moment is shutting down, and then our survival brain comes on board with the activation, so the fight, flight, and the shutdown. So if I just zoom in there, you can see it there. And that's when our emotional brain comes on board. It's our primitive brain, it's the survival. So with this survival, I've spoken into this in other masterclasses. We'll go into anxiety, so we'll feel panic, anxiety, we'll have these sensations in the body, but we'll also have thought processes that will come in. And many times in the fight flight, it's things like fix it mode. So we might get lots of emails, say, from work, and we sort of go straight away into I need to sort this out or else I can't relax. So that's a real anxious way of sort of working. Many people do that where they might work overtime to just get it done because they feel anxious, they'd feel too anxious to not fix it straight away. We can also go into a fix it mode in terms of someone might be upset and they're having an emotional response and we feel really uncomfortable about that. We get anxious. We're like, how can I fix them? How can I fix this situation? So that's another way of going into it. So there's other thought processes here. I have to work overtime. I have never ending work. So those are the sort of thought process. I'm pissed off. I'm over this. I'm out. So that's the flight response coming in. I can't believe how useless they are. That's the blame, the frustration coming in. Look at what they're wearing. So judgment lives in the fight flight. They're not even that good anyway. So again, judgment. So we can really have these, a lot of the thinking processes is about the external generally in this space. So it can be angry with other people. It's externalizing. They can't be trusted. I'm always explaining myself. I'm better than them. I'm so angry with ... Who do they think they are? So that's when we know we're in this anxious space. And when we function from this place, we generally don't get a good outcome. So we can also internalize this space as well, where we might be trying something new and then we judge ourselves. We might go into a bit of a spiral, but often that will send us down into a shutdown response. Now, this shutdown response is more when we are feeling like sad, depressed. Our nervous system has slowed down in the sense of our breathing might slow down. We feel heavy. We don't necessarily feel comfortable in this space. But we're more numbing out in this space. And our thought processes get pretty dark when we go into a shutdown. So I've got here, that we can people please, self-abandon, procrastinate. We become unmotivated, all these things that come in, and there's the sensations on the side there. But the thinking process is what I'm going into more today, and that's around what's the point. So we can have real kind of, it's very dark and sort of like stuck thinking. I feel stuck. I feel tired all the time. I'm exhausted. I feel down. And it can be where we judge ourselves. I'm not pretty. I can't. I have never been good at. I don't believe it's possible for me. I shouldn't have said that. So often when we say shouldn't, when we have absolutes as well, like I always do this to myself. I'm pathetic, I'm so dumb, when we're really hard on ourselves. This is where shame lives, and suicidal ideation lives here too. So people can have those thought processes because the nervous system here is shutting down. It's in a very helpless, powerless space. And it's also where shame comes in too. So often when we have social anxiety, we might come home and go into a bit of a shame spiral. Why did I say that? I shouldn't have said that. And I'll go more into that sort of stuff as well, where we really ruminate over situations. Rumination kind of lives in both anxious and shutdown. But what happens is we'll become anxious and then we'll go down into shutdown, and it will be kind of like a wave that goes up and down, where it's when we can't sleep and we've got cortisol in the body, but we're exhausted at the same time, and all of our insecurities come up, we're ruminating. This is pretty much what's probably happening to your nervous system. So let's check if there's anything there. So that's about this sheet here. Up the top, what we have is our thinking process when we're grounded, when we're curious, connected. This generally, many people get this feeling when they're on holidays. You know, you become creative sometimes when you've got no responsibilities, you just feel really relaxed and you're open. Yeah, and sometimes like creative ideas pop into your mind. That's generally when we're on a bit of a holiday, or when we're just feeling, maybe we've gone on a retreat or we're at yoga and we're just real grounded. So generally our thought process in this space is hopeful. I know I can achieve what I put my mind to. I'm hopeful that this will work out. I've got to where I am today so I can get to where I want to be. My strengths are, so we know our strengths. I'm reliant and strong. I know I can do this. I've got this. I know I can do this. I believe it's possible for me. So it's generally hopeful thoughts, and we can see our strengths. We can see our capabilities in this space, and our thinking really connects with that. So on the other side, let's speak into how do we stay in this place, and is it actually possible just to stay in this place? As we know, no, it's not. Stress is healthy in the sense of it's telling us and signaling to us that something needs to change or something isn't aligned or quite right. So when we become activated, that is information where there's inner wisdom. But we want to be able to come out of that trauma and our wounding. What it does is, especially if we've had like negative relationships growing up, or not encouraging environment, trauma and stress will keep us stuck in these places, because our thinking really connects with the sympathetic, the fight flight, and the shutdown. So we believe the thoughts that come up, and that's what keeps us stuck in those states. Whereas if we can start to become the observers of our thoughts and know, okay, I know what to do to get myself out of this state, to bring myself back up to ventral vagal activation. So how do I stimulate my vagus nerve when I'm in fight, flight, or shutdown? And that is key, because that's when we're thinking from our higher self. That's when we are thinking from our mature adult self. When we're in fight, flight, or shutdown, we're generally thinking from our vulnerable little inner child that is so scared, and it's going to do anything to soothe itself, regardless of if it's healthy or unhealthy. So what can I do in each state? So up here, this is where we say routine and habits, boundaries, values, needs, self-care, self-love. So it's all easy to say those things, but the thing that it makes it hard is our protector and our thought processes, which is generally our protector here too in fight, flight, and shutdown, kind of derail us a little bit from having all these things. So if I want to have boundaries, I might find that my shutdown is scared to express boundaries, because when I was young, I was disconnected from, I was punished, or I was dismissed when I expressed a boundary, and I was never taught how to express them in a way that were healthy. So maybe I've got an association with setting boundaries and expressing boundaries with a shutdown response. So I might shut down. So that's where, and then my thinking might be like, yeah, I can't even express a boundary. It's too scary. They won't like me. They will reject me. So that's where our thinking comes in. This is why it's not that easy to be up the top if you've had trauma. So that's the easy part up the top. If it was that easy, it would be great. Then we've got the next step, fight, flight. What do I do in fight, flight? Bringing ourselves back through breathing, and just knowing what our fear responses are, like what are fearful moments in our life, what environments, people, situations put me in a fight-flight response, and starting to get to know that part of yourself. Create a grounding list. So what grounds me? What gives me this peace? This, is it yoga? Is it going outside, putting my feet on the ground? Is it going into nature and walking? What gives me this, what stimulates the vagus nerve and gives me peace, groundedness, connection, all those things. So that's making a list of that. Activation cheat sheet, I've got that, and that's just, it's stopping and slowing down before responding. Our sympathetic activation, what it wants us to do is it wants us to respond straight away. So we get activated, anxious, and then we go, because that's like anxiety is the fight flight response. So it's fast paced, and the opposite is what's needed to slow down, breathe. Even just that alone, you'll be able to bring more conscious awareness to your process of what's really happening rather than the story itself. Okay, bring our adult self online too, because generally in this phase we're in our vulnerable little inner child. And then in shutdown, what can we do there? We can move our body gently. So something that can, even swaying, listening to some music, breathing, calling a safe person, cuddling a pet, a warm shower can even change our state and our nervous system. Nature walks, and again, more grounding tools for when we're in this state. People will resonate with the fight flight or the shutdown response more. So like for myself, I resonate with the fight flight response, and that's where I have found most of my stress. I'm in that space. A lot of people who have suffered sort of from trauma where it's like highly abusive, and also, or not even highly abusive, but emotionally neglectful, those sort of things, you can find yourself in a shutdown response because it was safer to not be expressive and to shut down. So knowing even Deb, what is her last name? Deb Dana, she talks about where's your home away from home. So what do you resonate with the most, the fight, flight, or the shutdown? And then make a list of how you can come out of these states. Once you've been there for a little bit, you've understood why you're there, and then you go, okay, how can I bring myself out? Generally, we have glimmers that come up. Our body, our being, always wants to heal. It will always have a glimmer of hope. Anytime we have that glimmer, we want to take a glimmer. It might say to us, you could get up now and go for a walk outside, or you could get up and have a warm shower. That's a glimmer saying it's time to move the body, and we want to take those glimmers. Okay. How are you going, Amy? Good. Excellent. So let's talk about distorted thinking. I've got examples here. Feel free to read through them. What they are is, it is just very much black and white thinking, comparing ourselves to other people, personalizing things. I'm going to give some examples of this too. Mental filters, so focusing on the negatives. A mental filter, the interesting thing about this is anytime you will find, it's called the reticular activation system, and what it is when you buy a new car, or maybe you're looking at a car that you really like, you will find that you'll see those cars on the road everywhere, and it's not because there's more of those cars out there, it's because you have now brought into your focus this car, so you're seeing it everywhere. It's filtering out all the other cars so you can see that. It's the way our brain works, so we can actually function in life. It filters out information so we can process things and see around us and be able to function. But what happens with trauma or unstable upbringing, dysfunctionality or chaos in our life when we're growing up, it creates a hypervigilance to the negative or the things that are unsafe. And so what happens is we focus on those things. That's distorted thinking as well. And I'll never find a partner, so real absolute, like never. I couldn't ever do that. Really being identified with things, so that black and white thinking again. magnifying things, fortune telling. So my cholesterol is going to be sky high. Comparison, I've said that already. Labeling, I'm just not a healthy person. So when we really identify with this one part of our personality, and that is also distorted thinking, because there will be a part of us that is healthy. So it's very black and white as well. Okay, and also another distorted thing is like, I know this already. I know all the things that you're teaching me, because we can always learn something new if we have an open mind to it. Okay, ruminating is more overthinking things. So this is a really good example of what I said before, when maybe you're in a social setting and you just ruminate over the conversation. Maybe someone breaks up with you and you ruminate over, what did I do wrong? Did I do something wrong? Which is rumination and distorted thinking at the same time too, because anytime we think that we blame ourselves completely for something, that's really quite, again, black and white thinking. So, yeah, rumination. These things come in place in the fight, flight, and the shutdown response. So it means that we're feeling unsafe, and there's a part of us that's trying to find meaning from the situation. Intrusive thoughts, anything that come in around that, generally connected to our state and our emotion. Dwelling on the past, all this will come up when we're in the fight, flight, or shutdown response. Regrets, failures, perceived threats, all of this stuff. It's really unhelpful when we're trying to sleep. But we know now that if this comes up, that it's our nervous system in a fight, flight, or a shutdown response. It's a good signal. Then we go into the conscious limiting beliefs, and this is things like any excuse that comes up. You can see as a conscious limiting belief, because we're aware of it. Anytime we identify in a certain way, I'm not usually good at this. I'm not even going to try, or it's just my personality. People always hurt me. Anything that we justify or create excuses around is a limiting, and that's limiting our growth, is a limiting belief. Generally, there's more to it underneath, and it will be that there will be a core belief underneath that. So I've got there, anytime we are justifying our actions, decisions that go against our health, this is an indicator that we have limiting belief. And then even deeper, a subconscious belief. I already know this. I'm not as insert whatever it is, smart, pretty, good enough. I am independent. I don't need a partner or anyone. I've always been like this. Things like that are limiting beliefs. Then we've got the subconscious belief systems, and that's things like I'm unlovable, and examples of this and how it manifests. I've got two examples here. Being in a persona. So this is an interesting one. So being in a persona when we have walls up, so we might be more avoidantly attached, and we fear connection, and we fear intimacy. So we're kind of in this persona because there's actually a deep wounding there around not feeling lovable when we express our needs, our boundaries, our creativity. So we create a persona that is distrustful also of other people, and that reinforces this belief, because in the end, we then get rejected because we're not being our true self, our authentic self. And maybe sometimes that comes out later on, and then the person that you're with is kind of like, whoa, you've changed. You used to be like this and now you're like this, kind of thing. So then it reinforces the belief that I'm unlovable, because we get rejected. Then there's the other side of it. So there's more the anxiously attached that creates this scenario, being in a relationship with someone who minimizes, dismisses, and judges you for having needs and boundaries. They can be hot, cold with you, which is reinforcing the belief that you're unlovable. Generally, when we have the more anxiously attached person, they're taking on all of the problems and saying, and it's like, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing a good enough job, I'm so needy, and we're trying to hide our needs but also get our needs met at the same time. And we attract people into our lives that reinforce this, that you're being needy and a hot cold, and so then we feel unlovable because my needs aren't getting met. I'm not good enough, idolizing other people and seeing them as better and comparing ourselves, putting them on pedestals. This lives in more of the anxious style as well, where it's like other people are better than me, and then we attract also that, because we are drawn to people who have like a superiority, or they might have like a guru kind of persona, and so we get drawn into that space as well, reinforcing the belief that I'm not good enough again, and I don't have the strengths that they have. I don't have what special things they have. So that's another way we can reinforce that. I'm wrong. So taking all the blame again in relationship. And then when the relationship breaks down, internalizing it, like, oh, again, reinforcing, I've done something wrong. It was me. I should have done this. I should have done that. That kind of lives in the shame, shut down state. I am worthless. So this is a common one, to stay small. So it manifests as, I'll stay in the same job. I'll stay very small and quiet. I won't stand out. If I do, I'd probably feel like a burden, so I'm not going to do that. And so we really reinforce this worthlessness because we don't ever get seen for who we truly can be and who we are. And people see us as burdens, or we reinforce that because we might be drawn to people who, again, we see and put up on a pedestal, or they're more expressive than us, so we idolize them. Again, reinforcing the belief. And this happens because our strengths and our needs and boundaries weren't cultivated and encouraged when we were little, and it was scary to be seen. It was scary to stand out. So it's safer to suppress than what it is to stand out. But as adults, what we want to do with all these beliefs is we want to now, yes, they were good, they helped us survive when we were young, but now we want to reintegrate parts of ourselves to change these belief systems, or to speak into them and to understand why they're there and how we can meet the needs of them, to make them feel safer when we want to step out, when we want to be seen, when we want to be in relationship with others. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the fantasy. This has been a really interesting one that I've noticed more recently. It is very strong in the spiritual world. I have noticed that fantasy can come in. Now we create fantasy as a coping mechanism when we're young, and we all do it, especially if we've had trauma or dysfunctional, chaotic upbringing, any wounding around this, because what fantasy does is it helps us cope with any abuse that we've had in the past. So we create a fantasy as a coping mechanism to help us come out and be more positive and actually grow. So it was once really beneficial for us to create that fantasy. And now as adults, though, what it does is it takes us out of reality. And the way that you'll know that you're out of reality is that you'll be given feedback from people, and it will have the same sort of message in it, and then you'll tend to want to avoid or deny it. Anytime we want to avoid or deny feedback, there's a little bit of truth to it, depending on who it's coming from as well. But that's a good indicator that there's some fantasy happening. So in the spiritual world, it's the person that says they've got special powers and no one else can have those powers. It's the enlightened person, the one it's the cult leader as well. It's the one that sort of says that, like they can go into all these different dimensions and see God. I'm not saying that I totally know and believe that spirituality is there and it's a thing, and we all are spirit, and we all can tap into that space and intuition. What happens though, the fantasy comes in and amplifies what we want. We want to feel special, so it will amplify this, and sometimes we will dissociate. and that is in the shutdown response. Dissociating is in the dorsal shutdown. When we dissociate, we're not in the present, we're in this fantasy. There is some truth though. So a lot of people who've had a lot of trauma growing up can be very good at meditation, at going into the spiritual energetic realms, and they can be really amazing at this because that was the way that they coped when they were young. They kind of coped by going into the energetics and into the spiritual. What you want to do though with that is ground it into the practical everyday world, because the way you ground it is you get in your body. When we dissociate or when we're in the energetics or spiritual, we're not necessarily in the body. And the way to ground it is to come back to the body and to really listen intuitively to our emotions, our feeling state, our sensations, and the inner wisdom that it holds. But yeah, there's anytime someone has, like, if you feel like there's something not quite right, it might be that they've gotten a little bit of fantasy in their spirituality. And then we've got the person, that the damsel in distress that wants to win the lottery or have someone save them. This can be male, female. It's not just a female thing, but it's where we feel like we need someone else to always be around us to survive, to thrive. We're fearful of being alone. So the fantasy in this is, the reason why it's not a fantasy is because we believe we can't do it on our own. And we've created a persona, an identity around, I can't be alone. I can't do it on my own. I feel weak when I'm on my own. I can't be independent. And so that's not the reality of who you are. So that's why it's a fantasy. The state lives in fight-flight response. It's quite an anxiety-provoking state. And the reason being is if the person that you're with is disconnecting in any way, and because you're so reliant on them, it creates an anxiety. And so that's why it lives in that fight-flight response. And then the other fantasy that many of us have is, I don't need anyone. I'm independent. I'm happy to stay in my routine, eat the same thing, go to the same job, sit in the same place. I don't like drama. I just want to have a simple life. Now, this is the avoidant. It lives in the avoidance, the shutdown. And the reason being is I will avoid anything that creates or invokes any anxiety within me. So I'm going to just do this, just go about my bit. It's like Groundhog Day, but Groundhog Day is exactly what I want, because the alternative is for me to express myself, be creative, and step into my higher self. And that is terrifying, especially if you've had trauma around that growing up. Maybe when you were young, you're creative and expressive and singing in front of the mirror or something, and your parent just didn't like that or felt uncomfortable about it and was more valued academics or valued hard work, and was like, oh, stop being stupid, you're being silly, and then teased you and bullied you. That will really suppress the creative, expressive part. So generally people in this space really are avoiding judgment, rejection, anything that evokes any sort of anxiety. So the reason it's a fantasy is because it's not the reality of who you are. It's a fantasy of what is a coping mechanism to help you survive in the world. But it's been brought on as a kid, and it's now as an adult. For us to heal, we really need to see how we are in this fantasy. Especially at the top, the one at the top is also like there's a I'm smarter than you as well. The superiority of, like, you know, at its extreme, the cult leader, right? Like, I know better, you just follow me kind of thing. So there's like a real superiority. There's I'm smarter than you. So in order for us to not be drawn into that sort of relationship and that space, we really need to be solid in ourselves and know that, oh, actually, the one underneath, I can be independent. I can do this on my own. And it doesn't mean you have to do it completely on your own, but it means like I am capable, I am strong. So bringing and evoking those sort of qualities within ourselves. And then again, at the bottom, it's becoming creative, connecting back to ourselves, connecting to our needs and boundaries. So this is the last slide. It's all around slowing down and getting to know our nervous system. Slowing down is the biggest thing. Getting feedback from someone who you feel safe with. This is what therapy is for. Also, people in your life that are doing the work as well and can give you some really honest, safe feedback where it's not filled with judgment and criticism. Noticing when we're activated, identifying environments, people, and situations that activate us, and also the inner wisdom in this. Our emotions are really the navigation tool for us. Notice when we're thinking from that distortion, and it's really important that we don't follow the distortion or the rumination because that's not our higher self, that's generally our wounded self. And changing our state to become regulated again before taking action.